Hello, friends. Wait, why isn't... There we go. So, we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy. Basically, text is way too big. Hold on a tick. It should be this one that's active. Not that one. Good. Perfect. Hi. So, if you're here and you clicked on this video, then you're familiar with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't need to explain Final Fantasy VII. I don't need to go into the fact that it's one of the greatest and most well-known video games of all time. I wouldn't say it's the greatest game of all time. I don't even think it's personally, I don't even think it's the best Final Fantasy game on the PlayStation. But it is a good game, and it is a very well-known game, and the Final Fantasy VII Remake is spectacular. I have not played it myself. I have seen it played, but I'm going to talk about what makes it so well, what made it such a good choice for the remake treatment, and then we're going to look through the Final Fantasy series and try to decide, based on everything else, which ones would be best suited for the treatment. Not which I like the best, not which I think are going to be the most profitable, but the ones that I think would be best suited for it. So, what makes the Final Fantasy VII Remake work? I would say that one of the primary things is the characterization. Because the characters act in the Final Fantasy VII Remake the way that most players, I would argue, thought that they should act. Which is different from how they actually acted in the original. You see, people built up in their minds this idea of the characters, this idea of all of the different characters in the game, and how they interacted, and who talks to who, and who's friends with whomst, and these things are very well realized. Aerith is Aerith. There is no question there. Aerith in Final Fantasy VII Remake is more Final Fantasy VII than Aerith in Final Fantasy VII because of the extra time, the extra dialogue, the extra animation, and all of the little things that go into making that type of game. The little interactions of her chatting with Tifa, or her talking with Cloud, and the way her demeanor changes depending on who else is in the room. These very subtle things really add a lot to the storytelling. Tifa's reactions in the original to talking about Cloud not really being... him lying. Basically, to Cloud talking about... we're going to do minimal spoilers for all these, but this is a minor spoiler for 7, I guess. When Tifa is talking about... I'm sorry, let me start over. When Cloud is talking about some of his time in Nibelheim, Tifa should be speaking up and saying, "No, you weren't. I was there and you weren't." And it makes sense narratively. But in the remakes, you have the time to flesh that out. You have the time to actually show her reaction, to show her thought process, to show her discussion, whereas in the original, she just stands there as with no lines. Literally, she doesn't have a line of dialogue in that scene. But in the remake, it works. It's both an opportunity to elevate the original, to fix the original, and to reestablish the characterization of the original. Now, I want to mostly judge this on a couple of categories. One of the first categories is going to be, does the storyline make sense to be retold in a more action-focused, party-based style with heavy cinematics and heavy graphics? And I think some of my opinions may surprise you on this one. But let's get ready to go. Now, Final Fantasy 1. Can you see cursor? There's cursor. Final Fantasy 1. Final Fantasy 1 has very few lines of dialogue. Full stop. Oh, real quick, I will be covering other Final Fantasies as well, other than the main series. Just so you know, I have a couple other things that Square Enix has the license, has the IP to, that has held the Final Fantasy title in the past. Not everything here is going to be just a mainline game, though we are going to be covering those first and the most in-depth. So, Final Fantasy 1 has very few lines of dialogue. Like, as iconic and as revolutionary and as groundbreaking as it was at the time, what is the plot of Final Fantasy 1? You'd be hard-pressed to name a whole lot of what you actually do. The required scenes in that game are fight chaos, walk over a bridge, beat up some pirates for their boat, and then check on a couple of shrines, and then beat chaos again. There's not enough meat on the bone. That's the biggest problem with Final Fantasy 1 as a remake, as to getting this treatment. If you want Final Fantasy 1 to get a remake, then I have fantastic news for you. You are... Where is it? I set it aside here specifically. Where did I put it? Then you want to play Stranger of Paradise. Because that is basically... Not perfection. That is as Final Fantasy 1 remake as you're likely to get, and it fills the same role. It hits all those notes. In any meaningful way, to remake Final Fantasy 1 into a high-resolution, highly characterized game, you kind of need to change a lot about it to make that true. Whereas in 7, the changes that they made were changes that they made to elevate the original. Final Fantasy 1, and this is going to go for 2 and 3 as well, don't have enough meat on the bone. The changes would have to rewrite the original because there isn't enough dialogue or characterization. Final Fantasy 1, your player characters have no lines of dialogue. Final Fantasy 2, I do agree that it could use a second chance because the storyline never really had a chance to tell itself properly, but most of the time that there's lines of dialogue, it doesn't even tell you who's saying them. Most of the time the dialogue is just, I guess someone in your party says something like this. It's not even laid out. It's not even described. There's just not a lot going on in 2. I'm sorry. Now, one advantage that 2 has is A, specific characters. This is only really a problem in 1, 2, and 3. But 2 at least has actual characters. Maria, Guy, Firion, the other one. but they exist. They exist. There are characters in that game. But they are never given any personality to build off of. So, in the same sense that in the original Final Fantasy, you need to rewrite from the ground up the entire game, 2 follows the same way. You need to give a characterization to characters that functionally have none. Like, what is Maria's personality? Can anybody answer this? No. In my playthrough, I projected a personality onto Maria, because initially I didn't buy her any weapons because I wanted her to be a spellcaster, and then I kept on hitting the attack button enough times that she became a monk, and then for the rest of the game she just was a monk who beat face, and it was amazing. But that's because of a specific interaction that I have a story. Like, how many people cried a tear for Yosef? Like, be honest here, you know? But at least in that time period, we actually see Final Fantasy II begin the trend of actually having characterized characters. This isn't really the focus of the games until 4. I don't think that the original Final Fantasy is deserving of any remake other than Stranger of Paradise. The same goes for 2. You're not working with enough at the beginning. You're not getting off the ground with enough to be able to get the game rolling. You would need to rebuild and recharacterize and create a characterization for so much that it would not resemble the original, and thus it wouldn't really flow. It wouldn't really feel like Final Fantasy II. You wouldn't be looking at Barrett and going, yeah, that's exactly how Barrett talks, and man, that sounds exactly like how I have always pictured him in my head. No, you would say, oh, well, this is neat. Like, again, going to the comparison to Stranger of Paradise, there is a discrete enough amount of information in there that I have to put it in the no set category. I have to put it down at the bottom. And Final Fantasy III runs into a what? Wait, what? Get it? Why do you get up here? Eh? Where's my? No idea why this did a weird inset thing. Hold on a tick. I clicked somewhere. Unpin images. There we go. That's what happened. Cool, and good. So, Final Fantasy III suffers from many of the same problems as 1 and 2, except it has one additional problem off of 2. It fixes some of the problems of 1 of not having enough storyline to really go off of. Unfortunately, though, Final Fantasy III has the new problem, and that is that there are no characters. You're 4 Onion Knights. Yeah, we retconned Ark and, whoever else into existence, but fundamentally, you are 4 nameless protagonists, much like Final Fantasy I. And that means that there's no jumping point. Final Fantasy III has never really had a good narrative discourse internally, other than maybe Dissidia, but even then, Onion Knight is not terribly fleshed out. It's just not really something that's suitable. Now, here's where we change gears. Here's where things change drastically. Here is where we start to jazz. Now, 4. First of all, guess what? Come on. First of all, let's talk about this image here. Let's talk about this. Final Fantasy IV has a strong cast. We have strong, unique, individual characters who get fleshed out and who have personalities. We have much better writing. We have the writing that is inspired of characterization and individual personalities and people evolving and changing over time. You begin to have this actual narrative structure involved. For the first time in the Final Fantasy series, we really had characters. And not just either generic mock-ups of characters or the absence of characterization. And that's why, fun fact, Final Fantasy IV was originally slated to be the game that was going to be remade into a 3D game. Originally, before Final Fantasy VII Remake got off the ground, this is test footage from Square Enix of a proposed Final Fantasy IV remake. Final Fantasy IV Rebirth. And I think it's a good idea. It was the first game on the Super Nintendo, and while we do have actual personalities and characterization, like, not only does Yang have a personality, but his wife has a personality, and it makes sense that she's, that they're together. That I want to see the relationship. I want to see them grow together. I want to see the look on her face when she hands us a frying pan. All of these things work. I want to see the pain and anguish in Kain when he needs to decide if he can keep on going, or if he's a liability to the team. I want to see Lydia grow over time and become a new person. And yes, her name is supposed to be Lydia, not Vidya. It's Lydia. It was the classic L and R swap. Her name is Lydia. Everybody else has a name. You have Cecil. You have, everybody else has a fairly normal name. Rosa. Her name's Lydia. Deal with it. Okay. I want to see Edge thirsting. I think that would be very interesting. I want to see Edward's redemption arc, I want to see the twins be goofy. I think that this, actually, genuinely and unironically, is my top pick. And I'm going to go one further. After Years. After Years is bad. It's not, the dungeons are trash, the characters, the gameplay is just more 4, and There's not enough dialogue. It's not a very good follow-up. But you know what it is? It's more Final Fantasy IV content that follows directly... Well, not directly. That follows the main storyline of 4. It is a sequel to Final Fantasy IV, the After Years. And this would give them the chance to make that world shine. Do I put it in perfection or excellent? I think I saved perfection for something else. Oh yeah, Final Fantasy VII is perfect. It is the correct one, absolutely. But there's a lot of reasons why 4, specifically Final Fantasy IV, I believe is an outstanding pick. You have good characters. You have good character interactions. You have good storyline. You have a somewhat flawed presentation, because they were still learning how to use the storytelling elements of the Super Nintendo. They were still learning how to use all these options for colors and sprites and how to use the dialogue boxes to tell a story. And they managed to do an amazing job. Things like Cecil's Paladin Redemption and sacrificing his path as a Dark Knight would be incredible. Like, even just something that is so wasted in the original. Imagine the bombing of Lydia's village. It happens in the first couple minutes, and it's literally just some airships flying over, a close-up on the town, and it turning red, and then they tell you instead of show you that everyone there is dead. Imagine that being turned into an actual Nibelheim scenario. Imagine that being turned into a hellfire. Imagine Cecil and Kain getting caught in that and trying to save the people there. Imagine Kain going back into the burning city to save more people because he cares more about others than himself. Imagine, like, it was a bombing, but there was also a flyover as well. But yeah, it was arson. It was a destruction. Like, imagine Cecil telling Kain not to help others because they need to keep moving. Dark Knight Cecil would do something like that. There is so much in that, like, what is effectively a 40-second cutscene in the original could become an hour of nail-biting, tense, panicked gameplay that would set the stage for Cecil's redemption and realizing that he might be one of the baddies. Like, there's just such good storytelling moments in 4, and that is why the difference between 1, 2, and 3, and now we get into the higher numbered Final Fantasy games, into these 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. That's where these differences lie. And even then, I want to hold back on the perfection one for another entry or two, because of reasons that will become apparent at some point. I think, genuinely, that a Final Fantasy IV remake would be spectacular. It would take these characters and just truly elevate them in a way that they just didn't really have before, in a way that they really do deserve. Now, now let's talk 5. Let's talk Final Fantasy V. Oh my goodness. What an incredible game, first of all. Final Fantasy V is, mechanically speaking, my favorite Final Fantasy, and there's an interesting plot twist here that I don't know if you guys are ready for. See, 5 focuses on 4.5 characters. It focuses on 5 characters, with Galuf and with these two sharing roles in the party at different times. So right out of the gate, you have the animation benefit of not having to juggle. You have the animation benefit of not having to juggle all of these characters in your party, and many points of them 5 in your party at once. See, Final Fantasy VII has 3 party members at a time, and that works really well for the more actiony pace, and we're going to assume, especially if, after looking at Final Fantasy XVI, we're going to assume that that sort of pace is what they would intend for another remake. So, if you want to have that type of pacing, you having less characters is a benefit. Final Fantasy IV has 5 characters on at once, and frankly, all of them are there for narrative reasons. You can't just kick one of the twins out of the party to make room, and having 5 characters means that every battle is warfare. Every single battle is war, no matter how simple the encounter is, and that can be a lot. In 5, you only have 4 characters in your party at one time: Bartz, Lena, Ferris, and either Galuf or Kryl, depending on the storyline. That's a huge benefit. For an animation, for the animators, that means that they can focus all of their efforts onto a smaller set of characters and getting their animations correct. For the story writers, that means that they have more personal interactions with the characters that aren't going to be as spread out as a net, because that can happen now. Even in the Final Fantasy VII remake, there are times where you just kind of go, wait, where's Cait Sith been? Is he over somewhere? Or like, oh yeah, I guess Cid's back over this. But there's a lot of characters to keep track of. 5 doesn't have a lot of characters to keep track of, and that's a benefit. That means you can tell the story in a stronger way, as opposed to Cloud kind of cycling through companions, which happens sometimes. Or, let's be blunt here, the party, the very large party size of 4. I think that in this sense, 5 might be the strongest contender. Now, storyline wise, those 4 are kept very tight in the party. Those 4 become very close friends. They become brothers and sisters, and not only in arms, but in literal sense as well at some points. And that shift of narrative, works to the favor of making a more subtle and nuanced performance and character growth over time. Lena's sacrifice to the Wyvern can actually be given the weight that it would. And there's one scene that I will spoil minorly, and that is Exdeath, or Exodus if you prefer. And when Exodus burns down the Forest of Moor, it is known that one of the things that can defeat him is resting within the Forest of Moor. So Exodus decides to burn down the entire forest to prevent it from being able to stop him, because Exodus is always one step ahead of the players. He's a jerk. He's great. He's fantastic. Excellent villain. But that's one of those scenes where that scene playing out would be so powerful in a remake, because of the fear, because of the panic, because of the hellfire falling from the sky. Galuf standing up to Exodus and would be tear-wrenching. Like, it would just be incredibly effective. And beyond that, like, after that encounter, after that moment where the only thing that you have, the only lead that you have to beat Exodus is destroyed, you, the player, are given no directions. You, the player, are not told where to go next. You, the player, sit back and go, oh no, that was supposed to be the MacGuffin. That's how we're supposed to deal with Exodus. Oh crap, where do we go? And you are not told where to go. You have to think back about who else might have a lead. You need to think about who is alive that may be able to support you. You need to think about what an answer looks like. And that moment, even more so than the Sundering of Moor itself, even more so than that, I guess raising rather than Sundering, either that than raising the Forest of Moor itself, I think that those moments of ludonarrative, where the player themselves are sitting back and going, oh hells, what do I do now, is what I would like to see translated into the remake. I want to see the remake have those moments of, oh God, what happens now that we've lost everything? Those would be extraordinarily powerful. I think that 5 is my top pick. There are so many scenes in there that are iconic. You have the Gilgamesh. You have the battle at the big bridge. You have a close interpersonal connected characterization. You have just everything about it I think is perfect for the remake treatment. And 5 has the job system. Every single character in 5 can be any job. Now, this is more work for the animators, but it's work for animators in the costume design sense, more for the 3D modelers than the animators, though obviously both, because you need animes. But that is an incredible well of cosplay, of inspiration, of characterization, of personality, where that they can mine for every single character and still keep that original Final Fantasy V customization. In 7, you customize your characters based on what materia they have, and in 7 Remake, the characters get pigeonholed more, because in the original Final Fantasy VII, the materia is kind of the only way to the one of the only distinction points outside of the limit breaks. In 5, you can say these characters can be whatever I want. I can play with my party composition. I can make my party composition whatever I want it to be without messing with the core narrative. This is something like Dragon Age fails at, where in some of these, those games, you want to have the characters in your party that you like, but the game says no, you have to have a certain, party layout, a certain dynamic. And 5 fixes that by adding the job system, which 3 does as well, but again, 3 had different problems. 3's problems are separate from that. They are different problems. The only downside to 5 is that 5 is an amazing game as is. And that's where we start the conversation about 6. 6 is an incredible game. I do not think it's a stretch of the imagination or anything to say that Final Fantasy VI is one of, if not the best video game of all time. I don't say that lightly. Final Fantasy VI is outstanding. But there's a lot of reasons why it would not be phenomenal for a HD remake, unfortunately. First of all, the game is great. The Pixel Remaster is just an ideal, perfect way of playing the game. Second of all, there are, 20 characters? How many characters are there in Final Fantasy VI? Like, a bazillion? Infinite characters? You have so many of them. And for better and worse, there is no main character. Like, who is the main character of Final Fantasy VI? This is random artwork, I don't... but who is the main... Really? Wow, Strago's jacked in this artwork. You could argue that it's Terra, because she's the point of view character at the beginning, going from being the general of the army to turning against Kefka. You could argue that it's Locke, since his storyline is one of the most core to the world, and his emotional journey is the most complete. You could argue that it's Setzer, since he is, the Balthier character. He is the dramatic and dynamic gambling man. You could argue that the main storyline is that of the Figaro brothers making a stand against the Empire. You could argue that the main character is Mog, who is there tying everything together, trying in the background, trying to make sure that everything is going to work. You could argue that Relm and Strago and Shadow are core to their own segment of the story. There is so much going on, and I adore it, but it was not going to work for a character-focused story narrative. It is not going to work for the type of remake treatment that you're getting in these remakes. For the Final Fantasy VII Remake, for the Final Fantasy XVI experience, for the Final Fantasy XV experience. By the way, we don't really need to judge 15 and 16, since I'm considering them already to be this experience, for the record. And 15 has the 4-person party, right? You know, like you have this 3 to 4-person party already, and 16 you most I'm not that far into it, but so far it's mostly me and the dog, and occasionally Sid shows up. Like, I'm not that far into the game though, to be fair. I think that 6 is an outstanding game. I think that 6's story cannot be told effectively in a remake. I would love to play it. I would love to see everything about it. I think that it would be phenomenal. But I don't think it's the remake I want to see. Like, this is hard for me because 6 is my favorite video game. And it just gives me pain to put 8 higher than 6. Hear me out. Hear me out, okay? I'm going somewhere with this. Let me cook. Here's the thing. Final Fantasy VIII has the smaller cast. It has honestly a decent storyline that just needs better fleshing out, better retelling. It needs better retelling. Final Fantasy VIII getting a remake is a redemption story. Because there is a very good game buried under Final Fantasy VIII, but it is buried beneath Guardian Forces, Junctions, and a horribly told third act, a horribly scripted third act. There are problems with 8. None of the problems for 8 exist in a remake. You see that, right? None of the 8 has problems, but none of the problems that 8 has make it into the remake. Like, the problems with 8 are mostly structural and mechanical. Junction is a bad system because it encourages you never to use magic, because every time you cast a spell you become weaker because of the stat that you have the magic junction to goes lower. So you are encouraged never to use any magic. That goes away by rehauling the system, the magic system. The problem with 8 is that the ending is nonsense, and just even with a companion video is just poorly structured, poorly laid out, but nonsense. That gets fixed if you have another 3 hours to tell the story. Final Fantasy VIII needed another disc to be able to make out the ending in the way that it needed to be. Like, the biggest problem with 8 is that the early middle section of the garden and where the mercenary work is too long without having anything that's core to the world building really doing anything, and that the closing section of it, where you actually have all the things coming to a head, is not well enough explained. Any of these remakes are going to be restructured in the storytelling, but going to be rebuilt. The characterization is going to be improved, and Final Fantasy VIII has good characters. Like, Squall and Zell's battles are amazing. They're cool as heck. And Zell as a character is an interesting character. And then imagine the game switching to Laguna and his party. Like, that would be really effective. And you could foreshadow better. You have an opportunity to foreshadow better for the later sections of the game. I think that 8 not only would be a very good to remake, I think that Final Fantasy VIII needs the remake. Because unlike 6, unlike 5, the original is barely playable. And that's unfortunate. That's tragic. That is not a good thing. There's a lot of redemption available for Final Fantasy VIII, because like I say, there's a good game hidden underneath the nonsense. And if they remade it, they could have the opportunity to retell that story the way it deserves to be told. And I am taking physical psychic damage, but to put 8 above 6 in any list. This is painful to me. I want you guys to respect how much this hurts, okay? Okay, good. Thank you. But you see what I'm coming from, right? Like, you could actually make the love story resonate in a way that the old graphics couldn't really support. You could actually make the spectacle of the Ragnarok work. You could make these giant, like, incredibly well drawn, frankly, locales into real places. I think that 8 would be an excellent remake. But there's one other problem, though. And that's that 9 deserves it more. Because 9 has, foundationally, a good story. It has, foundationally, pretty good mechanics. Mechanics that would translate into another style very effectively. The idea of having to make actual gear choices about to determine about spells or strengths or effects is a iteration of the materia design of Final Fantasy VII, forcing you to decide if you want weapons with more slots or less, just built up into an actual sort of world. And Final Fantasy IX has already some of the best spectacle on the PlayStation. Remember how I said I didn't think Final Fantasy VII is the best Final Fantasy on the PlayStation? This is. Final Fantasy IX, I keep thinking is a PlayStation 2 game because of how good it looks for its era. And the Bahamut Alexander fight in that is a spectacle. It's a spectacle that we won't see in Final Fantasy again, honestly, until 16. It's a level of spectacle that we won't see until the Ifrit Phoenix fight in 16. It is a genuine clash between espers on the most grandiose scale possible. It is the characters' personality moments. These moments where the Princess Dagger is self-induced mute for several hours of gameplay because of the trauma that she suffers, is something that was mocked by players back when I played it. Before mental health was being taken seriously. It was something that people who were other than me saw and said, why, well, she just sucks as a white mage now. In a remake, you can actually show her pain. You can actually show her suffering. You could even show her trying to cast and help and failing, not only failing herself, but failing the party, and feeling even more guilt stacked on top of her for what she has failed to do on top of what she's done. These are moments that an HD remake can sell better than the original, and there's also moments for redemption. Quina's stupid as heck. Remember Aramont? No one else does. Remember the Rakgirl storyline? Do you remember Freya's storyline? Remember how it ends? No, you don't, because it doesn't end. It doesn't have an ending. There are story mistakes that are atrocious in 9. Freya's story literally doesn't have an ending. It just kind of stops and you wander away from that place. And that is the kind of thing where we want to have that opportunity, but we also have enough of a good foundation to build upon it. We have enough things that are really good about 9, and enough moments and scenes and personality that we can work it, into it. We have the heartwarming Vivi, all the Vivi scenes, all of the Vivi moments are just adorable and heartwarming and heart-wrenching, and Vivi in the HD remake having a cute little voice who's just doing their best and I think I can help would be adorable. But it's also not that serious of a game. I mean, 7 is not that serious of a game if we're being honest with ourselves. At most points, like Final Fantasy 7 is like 40% mini games by playtime. Like, if you think about it, like really think about it. So Final Fantasy 7 also has a similar rotating cast to 9. So they've already done the writing work of making Final Fantasy VII flow around a larger cast without being too large, like 6. And this is a similar cast size. I think that 9 it would be incredible as a pick. I really do. There's so much going for it already. It's well remembered. And it's a stage play. All of Final Fantasy IX is a stage play. Like, yeah, we have the play at the beginning setting the narrative, but like one of the final moments narratively of the game is literally a giant eye opening up in the sky, showing that the world is being viewed from the outside. You can't get more explicit than that, I mean. And Also, it's the one we're getting. For anybody who didn't know, I have buried the lead. There is actually a copyright claim for Final Fantasy IX Rebirth. Like, Square Enix has actually filed copyright paperwork for that. That does now. Things have gotten copyright paperwork filed. They have not been brought to light. Obviously, but that's also someone at Square Enix agrees with me on these points. Basically, is what I'm saying. Well, here goes the stream. Time for talk about the PS2 era. I forgot to fill my water bowl. Oh well, I guess I just have some apple juice. By the way, apple juice is really good for streaming. It's good for your throat. So, PS2 era. Let's go. Final Fantasy X. You know, the funny thing is that Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy 16 are both extremely linear. One of the things that 10 gets panned about is the fact that it's a series of hallways. I mean, 13 gets panned for that too, and 13's worse about it. But, like, 10 is not that linear of a game. 10 is a really interesting world. What do we do with Final Fantasy X? Do we want a remake of it? It has a good-sized cast. It defaults to 3-character battles, much like 7 does. It has a good foundation for a remake. It has a warmness in a lot of people's hearts. It has a strong opening sequence with Sin. But at the same time, it's a little bit awkward in a lot of ways. I don't know if it's the best pick. What is the awkward about it? Let me try to understand my own thoughts on the matter. Why am I saying it's awkward for the idea of a remake? Its world is very Caribbean. That's my take on it, at least. Its world is highly religiously infused, which we live in a world where one of the world's superpowers is trying to become a theocracy. It deals with world events and migrations and refugees. Like, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of landmines in 10. And Conley, the laugh that you're referring to is not a bad voice acting moment. I will defend that, because the moment that where Titus goes ha ha ha, the line before it is that he's trying to convince Yuna to force herself to laugh to take away the pain. Like, literally, he's laughing to try to force himself to laugh. It's supposed to sound forced, and it absolutely is forced. Like, it's a good line because it sounds like what it's supposed to sound like. It's supposed to sound like somebody who's scared pretending to laugh. It's like, yeah, no, they nailed it. Anyways. I'm mixed. It handles the summons very well, in a way that would work extraordinarily well in a remake. Like, the way the summons work in 10 is basically how they did the summons in Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? Like, having the summon appear for a certain amount of time and then do a large closing attack before it goes. They basically took Final Fantasy X as the framework for how summons work in Final Fantasy VII. They're not even, like, normal materia in that game. They are straight up aeons. I think this should just be good. I'm not fixing that. I think that it would be good. I think that Final Fantasy X as a remake would be good. It's not my favorite, because it's still replayable pretty well. I think that there's other ways that they could work on 10, and I'm going to put 10-2 in the same category. I think that Final Fantasy X, I don't think that the remake would be as exciting or interesting as I would hope it to be, frankly. Well, at the same time, it's a bit... I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that I can quite enunciate my feelings correctly enough here, which is hard for me. Alright. Let's recalc time. Final Fantasy XI. Hear me out. Final Fantasy 16 showed us how amazing Final Fantasy 11 would look in a remake. Final Fantasy 16 actually has a lot of Final Fantasy 11 in it, in world building, in its DNA, in its crystals, and its days of the week, and the way that it treats culture. The Final Fantasy 16, I would believe, started as a Vana'diel story. I would believe that Final Fantasy 16 was originally a set in Vana'diel the way that Tactics was set, or the way that Final Fantasy 12 was set in the Tactics world. It shows us how well that world would work. It brings me pain again, but there's a different pain. It brings me pain to say this, but hear me out so well. One of Square Enix's best storylines, I would argue their best storyline after Final Fantasy VI, is hidden in the second DLC of Final Fantasy XI. And it is a shame that most players will never play it. It is a shame that people who love the story writing of Final Fantasy games won't play it. It is a shame that I can't even recommend that they play it because there's so many issues with the game. Like it's just it's not even that. It's just not even a game that I can truly recommend people. But Chains of Promethea is unironically one of the best storylines that Square Enix has ever written, and it is just immaculately handled. Prish's storyline in that same storyline is handled exquisitely. Like the struggle of Tenzin trying to just simultaneously save his own land, but understanding that he may have to doom your land to in order to save it. Like there's a lot of very good writing in 11 that I would love to see be highlighted. I would love to see be shoved out the door and into a different game. And there's a really good structure to it too, because like Final Fantasy XI's basic storyline is the Bastok storyline. Bastok is the core of Final Fantasy XI storyline. Everybody else converges to fight the Shadow Lord, but the Shadow Lord is a Galka. It's a Galka from Altepa, who is and the Bastoker storyline actually covers before and, more importantly, starting at rank 7, follows the aftermath of the Shadow Lord situation. So following the Bastok storyline could be one full game. Then the second game could be following the Winder storyline, and then adding in the Chains of Promethea, which follows through some of the stuff with Shantoto, which follows through the research and the ossuary's research into the Holodem and Maya into the mother crystals, and that storyline could naturally lead into the Chains of Promethea, and then you could do a third game of Sanduria's storyline, and then bring Sanduria's storyline into bring Sanduria's storyline into the Wings of the Goddess storyline with Lilithset, who is herself Sandurian, with the dancers and make that the front line of that sort of battle using those stories. It splits into 3 games very neatly, telling the 3 core stories of Final Fantasy XI. I'm not going to put in perfection because it does have that same big problem that we have in 1, 2, and 3 of not having discrete characterization for the characters. But the NPCs have excellent characterization, but the player character in 11 is what the player character makes it to be, right? Whatever the player character wants their character to be is the character that they are going to have. This is very... There we go. So I think that 11 has a lot of potential, and certainly a lot more potential than you might expect, because no one's going to play it. Like, I mean, not going to say no one. There are obviously 11 players out there, and shoutouts to any of them, but there are so many barriers to playing 11. Much like 8, this is a chance for 11's storyline to actually shine in the way that it deserves to. That's really what I'm getting at here. 11's storyline would be given an opportunity to shine in a way that the original release was and is not quite able to be presented with. I think that this would be very good, and Final Fantasy XVI gives us a blueprint. Final Fantasy XVI gives us a blueprint of what it would look like. And a good blueprint at that. Like, world-building wise, I would not be surprised at all if Final Fantasy XVI was originally designed to be a Final Fantasy XI world. The Final Fantasy XI world, I should say. It's not because of the way they handle summons and dominance in that game, but originally. Now 12. Now 12 takes place in the tactics world. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think I'm going to call it neutral at this point. 12 has some problems, but it also brings a lot to the table. See, let's talk gambits. Let's talk gambits. I like them. Gambits are basically ways to... Oh, if you love 12 as a time killer and the bounty boards, go play 11. The actual combat mechanics of 12 are very similar to 11, and if you enjoyed that part of it and like just going out and killing some stuff, yeah, that's the appeal of 11 for a big chunk of the game. Anyways, 12. Where was I going? I had a thought and it went away. The biggest problem I have with 12 is the main character. It's not Vaughn's story. No matter how you splice it, Vaughn just shows up and isn't really necessary to anything. It should have been Balthier's story. It should have been, what's his nuts? The rightful king dude? It should have been his story. It doesn't really... The politicking is the problem. The politicking in Final Fantasy XII gets deep into the weeds of something that the main character doesn't necessarily fit with. So where do we go with it? Can a remake fix it? Yeah. It can. I think a remake can fix a lot of the problems that 12 has. The Gambit system lets you program your allies. And I mean, you can actually get into some nitty-gritty with it. Where you're like telling ally, use Kiraga if one player is below 30% HP, use it as an AoE spell if more than 3 players are less than half health. Like, you can really customize an AI for your characters, and I think that would fit really well. I think that would fit weirdly well in a remake, in this sort of HD remake. I think that would run the risk of making it even more action-focused than Final Fantasy VII and 16 already are, which, I mean, yeah, it could be a problem. But it also has a lot of benefits to it. Its world is already gorgeous. Final Fantasy XII has a beautiful world. Like, Final Fantasy XII's world is already staggeringly gorgeous. I would love to see this rendered in a photorealistic 3D. I think there's a lot of just architecture that I would love to see in Final Fantasy, that I would love to see come out of a Final Fantasy XII remake. There's just... There's a lot to love, you know what I'm saying? You have multiple races, you have a fairly core party, You have enough of these winks and nods that would translate well to a more personal and a more up close art style. I think that it's a good choice. It doesn't have some of the heavy, outstanding moments like Final Fantasy V and 9 have that scream, "Oh, I want to see that in HD so much." It doesn't have these quiet personality moments that 4, 8, and 11, especially in Chains of Promethea, have that you would want, that the players can connect with. You don't have as flawed a baseline as 8 and 11 that you need to recover from. I think it would be good, but I think good is where I leave it. I don't think I'm realistically going to go higher than that. I think it would be good. I don't think it would be bad. I think that's a good place for it. It would be good. Like 10. There would be nothing wrong with a remake, and it would be well worth playing. But it doesn't have enough things screaming that screamed, "I am desperate for this." That scream, "We need to see this." 13. 13 is interesting on this list because we're skipping over 15 and 16. And 14 is a completely different game. But 13 is the first time we see Final Fantasy start to actually hit those high resolution graphics. This is when we start to actually see the Final Fantasy games in the fidelity that we're talking about. The world of 13 does have these large, grandiose things, these large, grandiose, powerful moments of the... What are they called in that game? I forget what... the summons. I forget what they're called in that game. And it could use some touching up on the personalities to help the players connect with them more. But at the same time, it didn't really get there. It didn't stick the landing. And what is it, Eidolons in that game? Okay. I thought they had some weird new name for it, some weird special title name. I do not recall. I don't think that the story is really going to be worth saving, and I don't think that the graphics are going to be that much improving. Like, Final Fantasy 13 is already baseline, has a lot of the fidelity that we're talking about in giving these remakes. Not quite, not as much as 15 and 16, of course, but it's a lot more recent, and its DLCs apparently make it a lot better. Apparently its DLCs are wildly better than the base game. I did not play the DLCs. But I think that it's already got everything that it would need. I don't think a remake is in order for it. I think that it's not going to benefit. Because you already have the fidelity, you already have, like, the things that a remake would give it, and that time and effort could be spent elsewhere better. 14, I'm leaning towards the Solite, because unlike 11, 14 is very approachable. Anybody can pick up 14, and honestly, it is kind of worth it to do so. Like, just being honest, I'm not going to say spend, 17 years playing the game. I am going to say that if you want to play the game, it might be worth it to pick up the game and play a couple of the storylines. Play through the base game, play through Heavensward, play through Shadowbringers, and, for the storyline as an RPG, not as an MMO. And then, tip your hat, gracefully bow and leave the stage, if that's what you want to do. I think that 14 is a good game to play, but I don't think that its storyline would work as well for the HD remake. In addition to having the same problem as the 1, 2, and 3 set of the character not really, of the character not having their own personality, because blank slate, because it's your character. Which again, 11 also has that problem, but in 14, you don't. 14's already approachable. You can go play 14. There are good character moments that would be very fun to play. But a lot of the battles would be incredibly fun in that setup, in that layout. But I don't think it needs it. I don't think that an HD remake, single-player version of Final Fantasy XIV is something that the world needs in the same way that it does for 11. You hear what I'm saying? Tactics. Where are we going with tactics on this one, huh? Oh, I do also... Oh, that's right. I wanted to mention, for Final Fantasy X, give me a Blitzball Manager standalone game. I am not kidding. I am not memeing. Give me a Football Manager game where I manage a Blitzball team. I would unironically play that. Like, I've never played any football management games in my life. I know that there are several out there, both for football and American football. Both, the Madden and the FIFAs and all that. Give me a Blitzball. What year is it in Final Fantasy X? And it's just year, I have no idea. Give me a Blitzball 973. Give me the 973 year for Blitzball season, and then give me seasonal updates. I would be all about this. 10-2 had something like that? Yeah, but I mean as a standalone game. I mean as its own game. Just give me a Blitzball Manager. Or just like a Blitzball playing game. Like one of the two, That would be incredible. I think that tactics... It's hard... See, we finished the main series, right? 15 is already has that cinematic quality, and 16, which I'm playing through currently, doubles down on it. Great games, highly recommend them both. But we finished the main story. All of what we have left are side stories, and we're not going to get into every single thing. I'm not going to get into, I'm not going to get into King's Tale. I'm not going to get into Record Keeper. I'm not going to get into... Don't worry, I'm not going to get into Record Keeper. Though, this top row here, I actually do want to talk about it, though. But now we're going into the realm of something very much outside, and that is starting with the one primary concern. Tactics is a warfare game, right? I mentioned this with Final Fantasy V already, how having that many characters on the battlefield can become can kind of change what it means to engage in a fight. You start going from 3 characters to 5, and in tactics, how many characters can you get on the field at a time? Including is it... I want to say it's 7. Like, that's too many. Like, that's too many to be able to maintain the battlefield. The remake works well for a small, intimate group of characters. Do I think the storyline for Tactics would do well in this? Absolutely. Do I think the individual characters for Tactics would be good in here? Absolutely. But I think that Tactics would have to be remade as a Tactics game. Like, a different Tactics game, I could see it being remade in something that resembles more of a... I mean, I wouldn't say like a Total War game, but like, I could see Final Fantasy Tactics being changed into more like, what is it, the Remnant, or... I'm trying to think of a good comparison game for the playstyle, because I don't think... The biggest thing in here is that I don't think that the gameplay for Tactics would fit. I'm trying to decide what kind of gameplay would fit it better. Because fundamentally it's a war game. Heroes of Might and Magic style? No, I do not think so. uh, I think tactics would be better to go on full to go more like Fire Emblem or Valkyria Chronicles. You know, if you want to remake Tactics 1, I think the right play is to give it a Valkyria Chronicles style of gameplay, rather than the HD remake style of gameplay that we see in 7 remakes, all 3 versions, and in 16. I think that this type of remake would be wrong for Tactics. Which is not to say that I don't want Tactics remade. That's a different conversation. I do want it remade, but I don't think that it deserves the HD remake treatment. That's really the core of what I'm getting at here, here. I mean, Triangle Strategy is just a tactics game. I mean, that's like saying you do it like Disgaea or something. Like, no, it already is that. I just don't think that yeah. And maybe a Total War type of gameplay would work for Tactics. Maybe, like, you work a Total War type scenario, and make it more about a squad and a team. You know, like, I think that there's a better way to rework Tactics. Dissidia, I hate to say it, but it's actually kind of good for this treatment. Like, the storyline is okay, but the characterization is great. The characterization in Dissidia really does nail what I was talking before about making the characters feel the way that I've always felt like they should feel. You know, which is one of the high points of Final Fantasy VII. And a single player thing would work well, except for the fact that the world makes no sense. Because in the same way that 12 would work well because of showing off the world, you know, of 12, Dissidia fumbles that. The world is an empty plane. The world doesn't have anything other than puppets and other Final Fantasy characters. There is the benefit of having those characters talk to each other in a more high-definition way, but they already do that with pretty good voice acting. I'd argue really good voice acting, even in the English. But, like, it's a story that could be told again, but you can go back and play it. It's still there. I don't think Dissidia would be a phenomenal rework, I guess. But I do think it would be for Cerberus. There's the hottest take of the night, I think. Dirge of Cerberus? Yeah, do it. Give me that. That actually would fix it. Because there is a storyline in Dirge of Cerberus. There is a characterization in Dirge of Cerberus. And it's flimsy, but there is something, you know, there is, like, a plot and, you know, some emotional moments in there. And they already have made references to it in the 7 remakes. Like, Dirge of Cerberus is canon, whether you like it or not. And yeah, bring it back Gact. Like, just straight up bring up Gact and, like, just put him in the game. I want to have Gact on my screen at all times. He's beautiful and I love him. The honest answer, though, is that, well, it would be good. I don't think it deserves to be in the excellent tier. Mostly because it is a Final Fantasy VII side story, and the Final Fantasy VII storyline already has him in it, and likely to get much more face time in the next game. But, like, yeah, a rewrite to clean up the story, like, fix the everything. Make the gameplay match the cutscenes better, which was my biggest gripe about it, is that cutscene Vincent got to do so many cool things that when I was controlling Vincent, I couldn't. That was unironically the biggest problem I had with Dirge of Cerberus. Alright, now we're getting into the weeds. Who's ready to get into the weeds? Final Fantasy Adventure. No, I'm not doing Tactics Advance. No. Final Fantasy Adventure. This is Seiken Densetsu. This is Seiken Densetsu 1, which becomes Secret of Mana on the Super Nintendo, which becomes something else later, which becomes Legend of Mana. Also on the Super Nintendo, or it was remade already once. And that's one limitation of it, is that Final Fantasy Adventure has already been remade like 3 times. And all of them are weaker than the original. Like, Sword of Mana was okay, and the Secret of Mana remake for the PC is just one of the worst abominations of PC gaming that I've seen. I think that Final Fantasy Adventure also doesn't have enough meat on the bones. It falls in that same problem with Final Fantasies 1, 2, and 3, where there's just not enough meat on the bones to really flesh out a world. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I think we just put it to bed. The music would be incredible. There would just be some of the best music ever. Like, Final Fantasy Adventure, the entire Secret of Mana series, unironically has bangers from start to finish. Outstanding music. Love it all. But I don't think that it would go well. Now, Saga, Final Fantasy Legend, would be bad. But, Final Fantasy Legend 3, I actually think would be excellent. Final Fantasy Legend 3, Saga 3, for the Game Boy, not Game Boy Color, not Game Boy Advance, no, for the Game Boy, the brick one, the one that can survive a nuke and yes, and still play, and yes, we have photographs of them actually doing this. Final Fantasy Legend 3 actually has a team of 4 characters right out of the gate. But what makes Final Fantasy Legend 3 interesting is its core mechanic of changing your character's race. There are 5 stages where the character can go from being a human, or Esper, if you prefer. There's 2 Espers and 2 humans in the base party. And you can go towards being a cyborg, and then go farther towards becoming a robot, or you can go towards becoming a beastman, which can go farther towards becoming a full-on monster. And every single enemy in the game is something that you can be. Like, those are not just enemies. Those are things that you can be while your characters retain their mind and intelligence. And I think that would be really interesting, because it's not impossible, to the point where it's almost common, to have, like, one of your party members be a dragon, one of your party members just be a cyborg ninja, and, like, yeah, Final Fantasy Legend 3, yeah. Like, I think that would be fascinating as a gameplay mechanic, to actually let the player genuinely be monsters, and they reuse some of the monster animations. And there actually is a good story there. The story follows 4 characters, and it might be too much animation work to make sure that, you know, every single version of what the players can be has the full emotive set to be able to take place in all the scenes. But I think that there is enough characterization to make it interesting. Do I really feel like it's excellent? Maybe I do feel like it's good, because it does have a little bit of the meat on the bones problem of not having a ton of story. But then again, the worlds and the locations are really cool. But it did already receive a remake, and the remake that it got was atrocious. If you want to see me having a bad time, also, if you like my content in general, like, I've been doing this for a couple of years now. The playlist tab of my channel, I have playlists going back for years. If you find a game there that you want to watch, you can go back and watch some of my older VODs. You can watch the Saga 3 Nintendo DS remake and how catastrophically bad it is. I finished the whole thing. I kind of hate played it, at least through most of it, if I'm being honest. If you want to watch me have a bad time, there you go. But because I played the remake, which was terrible, you see. So, but I think that Final Fantasy Legend 3 is surprisingly high. I'm not going to put it as high as 4, 11, 8. Like, no. I'm definitely not putting it anywhere near this category. And there's a temptation to drop it down because it does have its issues and there's a lot of structural problems with doing so. But I have it in my heart to leave it on good. I have it in my heart to leave it in the mid tiers rather than going to the lower tiers. I think that there is enough of a game and enough of a story, but moreover, it's the core mechanics of the world, which is something they messed up in the 3DS remake. Just why the heck did they do that? But actually, it was just DS, not 3DS. Anyways, it's not fantastic. But man, the core mechanics are good. The core mechanics of magic and talents and turning into other creatures and morphing into things, I think would be really fun to play around with in a larger, more fleshed out world system. I think there is something there. Alright, Chocobo Dungeon, obviously S tier. No, obviously S tier. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually gonna be, it's actually S tier. No. Chocobo Mystery Dungeon. Look, it's cute. But the thing is, you can't really translate the mechanics. The mechanics wouldn't translate over. I would love to see a more, it's amazing, but it wouldn't, no. I actually don't know what to do with Dimensions. Or Brave Exvius for, well, I guess definitely not the same, but Dimensions is such an interesting game that I don't know where to put it. And did I lose tracking? I lost hand tracking. Hello? Do I have hands? Do I have hams now? Where's my hams? Where have my hams gone? Yeah? Yeah, I have hams! Dimensions is a pretty good game. And it's a game that, like, I unironically can recommend. And no one's played it. Like, hands up in chat if you have hands. I mean, if you've actually played Dimensions. And call yourself out if you've never even heard of it. I'm just real quick. Humor me on this one for just a few moments. Like, it's first, yeah. So, hold on. Final Fantasy Dimensions is a straight-to-mobile release. It's not... It's... Okay, here's the thing. It's not unlike Brave Exvius. Brave Exvius actually does have a storyline, but it's a gacha. Final Fantasy Dimension isn't a gacha. It's not. It's an actual storyline game. It actually plays not unlike Final Fantasy V in many ways, honestly. It's not even I can't even truly consider it a bad game. But man, it is something that... Oh, that's not a good size picture. It is something that a lot of people have never touched. It's something that, like, that, as mentioned, a lot of people simply don't even know exists. Why? No, why is... Give me the actual image, please. Man, Google is so cooked. That's a little bit better. Like, genuinely, it's a decent game, but it's made to be a time waster. It's made to be a chill, kick back and relax. I lost viewers over bringing up Final Fantasy Dimensions. Wow. It's supposed to be a kickback and relax vibe game, and it's made for mobile. It's made for pick up, put down. Like, and that's a good way. Like, unironically, mobile gaming is fine. You can play Dragon Quest games on mobile. Like, I wouldn't slam mobile gaming out of hand, which I know a lot of people would love to do. But simultaneously, I don't necessarily think that enough people, frankly, know about it for it to get any traction. Not enough people know or care about Dimensions, and it doesn't. Honestly, it doesn't really break any new ground. I'm gonna put it in good, simply mostly for the idea of giving it a chance to shine, but I'm not actually. Dimensions and Dimensions 2 can go in sight. But like, it wouldn't be a bad game to remake, but there's just so many more important games that need remaking. Like 5 because it would be perfect in every way for it. Like 9 because everything about it would work extraordinarily well and could be elevated. 4 can actually tell the story that it tried to tell all those years ago. 8 could have a chance for redemption to fix the problems that were built into its core design. 11 would escape the shackle of being a early 2000s MMO, and its excellent, outstanding storytelling could actually be given a chance to be experienced by more people. And again, Stranger Paradise is 1. Final Fantasy 1, it is there. I don't really feel much of a need to go into anything else here, so I'm just going to rapid fire and say Chocobo Tales, lol no, Mystic Quest, lol no, Brave Exvius, nah. Like, Dimensions is a mobile game only in the sense that it is a game that was released on mobile. Like, Dimensions is a mobile game, but it's more like an early Dragon Quest than any other quote-unquote mobile gaming. Brave Exvius is a mobile game. It is. It just is. 13.2 falls into the same issues, but I don't even feel like it's worth putting up there, but whereas 10.2 actually could be a standalone. Dissidia and T, I already have Dissidia up here. Tactics Advanced. We're just going to ignore that. I'm pretty sure no one's clamoring for a Crystal Bearers remake. That's pretty sure, right? I did leave Final Fantasy Legend 2 out of this, just because Legend covers everything that Legend 2 has, and Legend 3 is the outlier that actually goes into more of a traditional Final Fantasy direction. Again, Saga 1, 2, and 3. I never played Mobius, actually. I played a lot of Record Keeper, but that's not a game. Neither is All the Bravest. Final Fantasy All the Bravest is not a game. Crystal Bears is the one with Layla? I think so. 15 is too much like what we're converting things into to really give it its own standing point. 7 Remake is what we're talking about. 16 is outstanding, but it's already where the remake that we're talking about would want to try to get to. And that pretty much fills out all of it here, because these are just, other things. Oh yeah, I assume everything I talked about with 12 is referring to Zodiac Age. Just for the record. So, recap. 1, 2, and 3, not enough meat on the bones. There's just not enough core basic game there to really make a new remake that would really be worth the time and effort to remake it. These would want to effectively be structured as new games in the way that Stranger Paradise is a retelling of Final Fantasy 1 without being a remake of Final Fantasy 1. If in that sense, any one of these 3 elevates up. Final Fantasy 1 is Stranger Paradise is a retelling. Final Fantasy 2, if it gets a retelling in that style, goes up to good. Final Fantasy 3, if it gets a retelling in that style, goes up to good. 2 might even go up to excellent if it gets that, but it doesn't have enough meat on the bones right now to be able to make it worth the time and effort to remake. 13 straddles that line of not quite being interesting enough and already having high fidelity everything. Tactics would need to be a completely different game. Tactics would not want the same remake style that 7 got, and that's sort of what we're judging this on. The story of Tactics, again, make it into more of an army game, make it into not quite a total war, but something that's a bit more grandiose, and I'm sold. But as it stands, I don't think Tactics is the play. Adventure, no. I think that series does deserve better than it's gotten, because several of the re-releases of the Seiken Densetsu series have not been up to par, other than the re-releases of the original ones. And Legend has the same problem as the earlier ones, but there's just not enough meat on the bone. 6 is unique in that its story would be outstanding to receive that retelling, and the characterization would be immaculate to set up in there, but it is slaughtered by the fact that there are too many playable characters and none of them can be defined as a main character, and most of the core scenes of the game do not give the player the ability to choose. Do give the player the ability to choose who shows up. You know, who shows up at any point in the Dark World is entirely up to the player, which makes it impossible to craft any number of combinations that would work. You could have a couple of set combinations, or you could totally restructure the entire back half of the game to make it work, but then you're destroying part of what makes Final Fantasy VI so effective, in that it wants to not have a main character, in that it wants to have a story about a world rather than a person. Which honestly was my biggest complaint about 7 for the longest time, is that 4, 5, and 6 are more about the worlds, and 7 is more about this one guy named Cloud Strife who does this one guy thing. 8 is about Squall. 9 actually spreads out a little bit more, but 10 is about Titus and Yuna. Whereas 6 is about the world and the team and the group. It's more of a broad scope, and that scope would not fit, unfortunately. 14 is very accessible right now and can be played very easily, and its storyline is pretty accessible to get into. It wouldn't get as much out of the remake treatment by being a more modern game. Dissidia would work, but the world is really what's holding it back. The world just isn't interesting enough. The world is a blank slate, and that sort of blank slate world. Final Fantasy II has a world, but the characters are blank slates. Dissidia has characters, but the world's a blank slate. it just wouldn't really flow without restructuring a lot more. Chocobo Dungeon would be cute, and Dimensions, I think, just deserves an honorable mention to give it a chance for people to play it. 10 would be good. 10-2 would be good. Releasing 10 and then releasing 10-2 as afterwards would be good. There's a lot to love. There's a lot to love about the originals. There's a lot that the remake would be able to elevate, and there's a lot of things in here that a lot of good character moments and a lot of good spectacle that you could put onto a pedestal with the remake. It's just in the mid tier because it doesn't have the benefits of the spectacular points that the ones above have. Same with 12. You could do it. Be fine. Dirge. It deserves a second chance. It wasn't a very good game. As much as I want to enjoy it, I just gotta be honest, it just wasn't that good of a game. But with a 7 out, re-releasing Dirge of Cerberus with more modern controls, with GACT, with these the advancements in gaming that we've had, with the storyline integrating into Final Fantasy VII Remake, I think that this is actually something there that could be interesting. Legend 3, has just enough for me to be convinced that a re-release, a remake, would be fascinating. Because there is a good storyline. The last time they tried to remake it, they failed at the core of the game. But that core really could push the game. And the excellent tier, 4. Again, we're going to go back all the way. Again, 4 was originally Class 2 have the remake rather than 7. And I absolutely believe it deserves it. Like, 4, I think, is such a strong contender. It has a similar size. It has it has an amazing cast. I think that the story moments in it are personal enough that seeing those personalities shine through would work very effectively. I think that 4 is a very good contender, and it's tempting to put it into perfection. After Years, not a lot of people played it. It was a Wii Shop exclusive release as a genuine, unironic sequel to Final Fantasy IV years later. And man, it was okay, but like, if you re-released 4 and After Years as the same storyline, as actually talking about one story and leading into the other with better foreshadowing and better structure of After Years, yeah, I want to learn more about that part of the world. 8 deserves it the most. It would give all of its failed systems a chance to shine. It would give all the issues that the game had at its base release, all the grievances that people have about it. There's a good game hidden underneath there, and if given the chance, I think that it would be an incredible experience to play Final Fantasy VIII the way that the developers originally saw the game being played. The way that the game could have been played. The way the game wanted to be played. What wanted to exist but could not at its time. And with the amount that we've learned about games and game design and world building, I think that 8, with better foreshadowing, better pacing, seeing the spectacle of the world before your eyes, is such a great thing. For all its difficulty, you enjoyed it. I mean, yeah, there's a lot to enjoy. There's a lot not to enjoy, but there's a lot to enjoy. And 11, storyline-wise, I honestly want to put it in perfection. The storyline of the Bastocken storyline, the Windurstian storyline leading into the Chains of Promethea, the Sandurian storyline leading into Wings of the Goddess. I think that 11 deserves that opportunity. 11 has such good writing, especially in Chains of Promethea. Has such excellent writing, and is just being held back so hard by being a PlayStation 2 era MMO, that I want that story in a way that I can actually that in a way that's more accessible to more players. And I think that the remake would be outstanding. And we've seen a lot of what the world of Final Fantasy VII would look like in Final Fantasy XVI. A lot of what Vana'diel would feel like. And then in perfection, Final Fantasy VII was the right choice. Final Fantasy VII was such the right choice, not only because of its popularity, but because it gives the personality to the original that the original didn't even have itself. It characterizes the characters better, and it feels more like Final Fantasy VII than Final Fantasy VII is. It's the right choice, and they did an outstanding job with it. 5. Everything about 5. All the characters, flawless. All the personalities involved, just so strong, so interesting, so emotional, so interpersonal. Like, I think that this would be my top pick. I think that not only because it would be an excellent storytelling, it would be incredible to see things like the fight between Exdeath and Guido, like being able to see Cid working and sweating, actually rebuilding the ancient airship that is found. There's so many amazing moments in Final Fantasy V that you can look to and say, yes, I want to see that in full definition. I want to see the look on Lena's face when she confronts Ferris about being related. I want to see Ferris call out the Chancellor for dead naming her, for dead naming them. Like, I want to see Ferris look at the Chancellor and say, I am not Sarissa anymore. That's not my life. I want to see Galuf, who is a charitable and friendly old man, who, despite being one of the original Warriors of Light, is still an affable and complimentary and fun member of the party. His age does not get in the way of him relating to people, because he values people for their wit, their intelligence, and their not honor necessarily, but their wit, their intelligence, and their passion. And because of that, he doesn't feel apart from the party, despite being double the age of anybody else in it. You know, if we put Ferris and Lena at like 22 and 18, if we put Bart's somewhere in that range, yeah, Galuf is nearly triple that. and Kryl could overcome that the original writing of being a little bit more whiny, a little bit more subdued, and really come out as someone who not only who wants to follow in her grandfather's footsteps and is able to prove to herself that she can. Able to prove to herself that not only can she follow in her grandfather's footsteps, but also get his blessing and get his strength to do so. Like, the emotional moments of 5 would be staggeringly beautiful. And that leaves Final Fantasy IX, which both needs the re-release to fix some of its storyline problems. Freya's storyline just sort of dead-ending. Like, Quina's not really fitting the rest of the world. Amarant, just everything about Amarant. Like, there's so much that's good in 9, and so much that just needs a little bit of a push, and so many beautiful, intimate moments that we would be able to see these times of seeing Dagger's trauma, of seeing Zidane playing to the world as an audience, as if he were always on stage, and also masking and hiding his true feelings because he's masked for so long that he scarce knows them himself. Seeing the big doofy Steiner doing his best and giving Beatrix more lines, more personality, like, plus the raw spectacle. Plus the raw spectacle of... There we go. This picture was actually my desktop for most of... The raw spectacle of Bahamut fighting Alexander would be just... It would just be flooring. It would just be... You know what? I'm just going to show what this was. Hold on one second. No, I'm actually going to do this real... One sec. I'm going to do this right. Give me a tick. I am going to risk the copyright claim and pull up this for you guys, just so you can see, if you haven't played 9, what I'm talking about. This is PlayStation 1. This is Bahamut attacking... Imagine this like, this is, again, PlayStation, same system as Final Fantasy VII, gave us these graphics. Yeah, it's pre-rendered, but... You'd be forgiven for considering this to be a PS2 title. Skipping over some plot and movement, Aiko and Garnet are able to summon the Protector. We wouldn't see this level of... And, like, this little bit of human element here, right? This little bit of, here's the people on the ground who are being firebombed by Bahamut as we speak. That little human element that Final Fantasy IX has throughout the entire storyline that many Final Fantasies neglect. 16 actually covers it really well, though. And Alexander the Protector. I want to see this in full remake glory. The light of judgment seeking out Bahamut. And eventually piercing through him. And eventually, the eye of all, the eye of the audience itself proper, gazing down upon the world as Alejandro tries to protect its word above itself. Like, this sort of spectacle is part of the reason that I think Final Fantasy IX would be just that in a modern light, that in a modern lens with modern cinematography. That's the level of spectacle that we're getting. That is, you know, full-on God of War level of giant clash, combined with all the other reasons, every reason for every single thing on this list that is positive Final Fantasy IX has. Good base world, good characters, needs redemption, unfinished storyline, everything that a remake needs. Final Fantasy IX stands up and says, yes, I can provide everything to make the story excellent, and everything that the remake would offer me would be elevated by me. So those are my answers. Those are my picks. 5 and 9 are far and away the best two picks, both for everything involving 9 and everything involving 5. Condolences to Final Fantasy VI. I'm sorry, I just don't think that it would work. I just don't think that it would it would follow the same structure, and you would have to rebuild it. Whereas, unlike Strangers of Paradise, rebuilding Final Fantasy 1, rebuilding Final Fantasy VI is not going to give it any benefits, because Final Fantasy VI is already an outstanding game. Go play the Pixel Remaster. It's the best version of 6 to ever come out. It's the best version of 6 that ever will be made. I'm confident in saying that. I think that the Pixel Remaster is just the best way to play 6. And a big old hat tip to Final Fantasy XI. My love, I want this game I want these storylines to be experienced by more people, and I wish I could in good faith recommend that people play it, but I can't. There's way too many things holding me back from full-throatedly recommending 11 to people. It's just I can't. Hmm. Those are... That's everything. Nothing else here really fits muster. And, like... If I just go to check in, like, any other games you guys want my thoughts on, I guess is how we can finish this. Is there any other games that you would like my I guess consideration upon? Because like, yeah, Visions of Mana might be kind of cool. Live Alive actually could be really interesting with an HD remake, but has, you know, pretty big concerns because not you couldn't every location in Live Alive you would almost want to have a completely different art team working on to really push all of them forward, to actually make all of them shine, and that would be well out of scope for a game like Live Alive, which would rather thrive on its 2D remake style. We're not going to go into Dragon Quest games. That can be an entire separate thing, as would later Saga games. I will actually answer those two though, because Chrono Trigger I think would be excellent for a remake, for a Final Fantasy VII style remake. It has the right number of characters. All the combo attacks can be handled like That's another thing that Final Fantasy VII Remake actually just straight up does, right? Final Fantasy VII Remake straight up says, "Hey, what if we had combo attacks like Chrono Trigger?" It just full-throatedly does that. It just says, "Yeah, no, that's just a good thing to do." I think that Chrono Trigger would be excellent for that reason. I think that the characterization and the moments in that game could be very powerful with a remake's personalities, and yeah, I think mechanically, I think it would be excellent as well. Illusion of Gaia is hard because I don't think there's any way. First of all, that's Quartet. That's not we're outside the realm of Square Enix right now, but. So it's already in licensing hell. But as a real quick thought, though, I don't think there's any way of remaking Illusion of Gaia and making it a game that could realistically be called The Illusion of Time. The Illusion of Gaia, The Illusion of Time is the same game. Because the core of Illusion of Gaia, the heart of it, is in the moments that aren't fun. It's in the moments where you're waiting in line. It's in the moments where you're sitting on a raft. If you want to trip, go play my Illusion of Gaia playthrough in the playlist tab on my channels. It's good. It's a great game, but because the quiet solitude and the pain of things changing over time are the core of why Illusion of Gaia works, all of that would collapse and fail in a remake. So I think that Illusion of Gaia simply cannot and still retain its ability to be itself. Terranigma, no. There's none. You are one character for most of it, right? You don't. It's you and your. No, I'm thinking of something else. I don't think Terranigma would be near as good a fit as Illusion of Gaia, but even then, I just don't think it's a good fit. It also goes into very uncomfortable territories in the late game, which, yikes. Yeah. I do want to play Visions of Mana sometime. I've seen nothing. It just sounds so cool. All right. Outside of all this, Octopath Traveler is already an outstanding game. Go play it. That's the only other real thing that I wanted to touch that I could touch on here, other than tipping my hat and saying, "This has been a good time." I hope that you have opinions. tell me about everything that I said that was wrong in the comments section. And Final Fantasy Type 0 is perfection. That I can just slam into perfection, right? That's, yeah, easy. Okay, good. Thank you all for joining. And I hope you have a wonderful evening. I hope you have a wonderful night. Cheers, friends.